Chapter 81, Episode 81, The Kaplan Effect 2. Terms used in this chapter. MK2, an abbreviation of Mark II or Mark II. It often refers to the second version of a product, which is frequently used on military hardware. A rare monster, as its name implied, was a rare monster with a low frequency of appearance. Among those rare monsters are what is called the named monsters. The named monster was a special entity that was even rarer than the already rare monster, and thus, having a name separately classified it from the other monsters. Moreover, named monsters weren't just rare. Most named monsters were much stronger than normal monsters or possessed special abilities, though there were some cases where they were just like normal monsters. In short, they're difficult and tricky to fight against. However, it was extremely rare for users of the Legend of Heroes series to dislike encounters with the named monsters. Even ordinary users welcomed encounters with the named monsters, and it was all the more so for the rotten waters like Jude and Cordelia. Why was it like that? Why did users long for an encounter with a difficult-to-fight named monster? Let me say this in advance, it wasn't that the Legend of Heroes users were weirdos who enjoyed pain and suffering. What, wasn't it like that? No, it's not. No, wait, surely. No way, it's not really. Of course I'm the exception. I enjoy the thrill of highly difficult games. You and other rotten waters are weirdos who enjoy suffering. At Cordelia's shameless assertion, Jude nodded and said as he pretended to write in the air. Cordelia is a weirdo who enjoys pain and suffering. Memo. F***CK. Jude, who began to be slapped on the back by Cordelia, was thinking as he stared at the white grizzly whom they had just defeated. High risk, high return. It was difficult to fight against, but in return the rewards were plentiful. The experience gained was much higher than that of a regular mob, and the quantity and quality of the items that were dropped when they are defeated were also incomparable with the regular mobs. But this not a game, this is reality. In the game, if they defeated the white grizzly, they would get this and that item, but this was reality. The giant white grizzly was supposed to carry items that were used by humans who were much smaller than itself. But even if that is so, arg, why's your pain tolerance so high? Let's strengthen it. Hey, it hurts, it really hurts. Why are you using magic to hit me? Here it goes, here you go. It really hurts, it really hurts. I think you hit me in the bone. Nice, additional damage. Jude barely calmed down the happy Cordelia who had clenched her fist, before he looked back at the white grizzly. It's not just the equipment we could get. There was the mana stone embedded in the forehead of the named white grizzly, and since it was a bear, there was its gallbladder and its claws that were harder than steel. TN, the dried gallbladder of a bear, is used as an ingredient for herbal medicine. There were plenty of parts that they could take. Wow, look at this, there's also an item. Hey! Cordelia had rushed towards the side of the sprawled, white grizzly, and took out a small dagger from its hairy fur. What, why does it have an item? I don't know, maybe it used this as a toothpick. Oh, it's better than I thought. It's a dagger with a freezing curse. If you get stabbed by this, you'll get frostbite. It was a fact that he often forget, but Cordelia was definitely a wizard. She had grasped the magic of the dagger at once, and afterwards, she began to scour the fur some more with a satisfied face. There's nothing more. No, it's already strange that an item came out. Perhaps this was also the Kaplan effect. Anyway, since they had already defeated the white grizzly, and they couldn't stay here forever, they had to directly harvest the mana stone, gallbladder, and so on now. During the bighorn, the knights did it for them, but that was not possible this time. Cordelia frowned and was troubled, but Jude smiled and stepped forward. Don't worry, leave it to me, step back and take care of Kaplan. Can you do it? I can do it. Wow, you're so awesome. Don't fall in love. Yes, I won't fall in love. Cordelia nodded right away, and then passed by Jude as she headed for Kaplan, and Jude bitterly smiled before he took out his dagger. And around a minute or so passed. Cordelia shouted as she approached Kaplan, who had collapsed at a distance. Jude, Kaplan seems to have fainted. And He's timid and weak. He's a little different from the Kaplan we know. Well, we're still in the early stages. Isn't it because he had been through so much of this that he became the intrepid man of bad luck? That may be true. The convinced Cordelia examined Kaplan's condition some more before she turned to Jude. Jude was skillfully collecting all the necessary parts. Jude, shall we wake Kaplan up again? No, just leave him fainted. I think it'll be more comfortable for him that way. Well, we've still got a long way to go, so if he kept fainting, it would be bad for Kaplan. Yes, so he doesn't need to stay awake. Yes, that's right. The two had agreed yesterday to create the wooden board Mk2 by attaching the wind's wing arrow to the wooden board they had prepared in advance and using magic to make it fly. All right, let's keep going. Let's be fishermen who hooks monsters. Jude and Cordelia looked at each other and warmly smiled before they set off with the wooden board carrying Kaplan. The distance between the wooden board and the two were about 30 meters. Wow, it's coming already. His aggro's really freaking awesome. It had only been 30 minutes since they defeated the white grizzly. The two joyfully laughed as they stepped forward. Naturally, they caught a big fish again this time. Indiana Kaplan was both an archaeology expert and an adventurer. Having served as a professor at the Institutional Academy, a prestigious school within the Argon Empire, he had already been an extraordinary figure since he was a graduate student and before becoming a professor. The discovery of the tomb of Ironclad, the ancient dwarf king. The unearthing of the tombstones of Luplin, an old kingdom. The excavation of the crystal ball of Tatania, proving the existence of Tatania and the land of witches, which had only been considered a legend. The imperial family recognized his achievements and abilities in making discoveries of the century that were rarely made once in a lifetime, and granted him knighthood, along with a lifelong teaching position at the Institutional Academy, and Indiana Kaplan was able to enjoy the honor of being the youngest professor in the history of the Argon Empire. But if there was light, there was darkness. In terms of his accomplishments, he was supposed to be a star of the archaeological world and the treasure of the Institutional Academy, but he was always shunned and hated. Envy. He would have felt better if it had been just that. He could have endured it, thinking that it was the envy of the losers towards those who achieved remarkable success. Kaplan was the only one who came back safe this time. There is no such thing as a god of disaster, but how come every time he excavates, an accident happens? Isn't it on purpose? You mean on purpose? Do you mean that Kaplan intentionally causes an accident? It's possible. How come? Because he wants to take the credit alone. It was an outrageous slander. It was nothing more than a conspiracy theory without any evidence. How could he kill or injure researchers who went on an investigation together with him and disguise it as accidents just so that he could take the credit alone? It could be so. How does an accident happen like that every time? In the meantime, he's the only one who's fine. It was as people said. Despite the many accidents, Kaplan was always alive and well. There were many injuries, but there weren't really any serious injuries or deaths. It's okay, all of it are groundless rumors. How could they blame you for the accidents that happened? You have been hurt many times too. Those were the words of Bartol, who had volunteered for the assistant position that everyone avoided. How much had he been saved by those words? However, even Bartol did not last long. I'll quit. During his first excavation with Bartol, an accident occurred without fail, and Bartol was fortunately saved, but was seriously injured that he had to lie in a hospital bed for 5 months. Bartol didn't say anything to blame Kaplan. But he didn't say that it wasn't Kaplan's fault like before, nor say that it was his own fault. It was from then on. Kaplan began to go alone. He didn't work with others when he was conducting research or excavations. Anytime, anywhere. Just alone. Gasp. Kaplan suddenly opened his eyes, let out a gasp, and raised his upper body. In the midst of his confusion, several images suddenly filled his mind. A giant monster. White grizzly. The one who ferociously roared as if it would eat him at any moment. He was alive. He did not die. He seemed to have escaped from the monster again. What a relief. That was it. While breathing hard, Kaplan raised his head. Because he had crazy thoughts that it was his fault that he hadn't seen his group for a while. What about Jude? What about Miss Cordelia? They were definitely strong people, because they were the ones who saved him from the white giant bear. They were safe even though they fell from the cliff. So he had accepted their request to accompany him. It had been a long time since he had done an investigation with someone else. Please. Sir Kaplan. He heard a voice. It was a clear, pure and beautiful, as if it came from heaven. Kaplan turned his head reflexively and then swallowed his breath. The girl who was looking at him with the sunlight on her back was so beautiful that he unconsciously said, "Angel. I'm not an angel, I'm Cordelia. You remember me, right? Are you awake?" Kaplan nodded, and only then could he fully wake up. What about the white grizzly bear? Me and Jude defeated it, so rest assured, it's safe here. Cordelia said with a smile. As if it was nothing. Because we caught a big fish 7 times. Jude and Cordelia had already received information from the Wild Fairy Queen about the monsters that appeared in Raptor Canyon. There were no monsters among those that the two couldn't defeat. Thank you very much. You were in danger because of me. What are you talking about? Rather, I benefited from Sir Kaplan. Thank you very much for being with me. Cordelia was sincere. It wasn't only Jude, as Cordelia had a conscience too. It bothered her that they had used him as bait to attract the named monsters. But it sounded completely different to Kaplan, who was unaware of the situation. Is she really an angel? She received help from him. Thank you for being with me. How long had it been since he had heard those words? No, it wasn't that long. When he thought about it, he had heard of it when he first became a professor. How can a person be this kind-hearted? Despite being in danger because of Kaplan himself, she was worried about him. Cordelia's warm words were like salvation to Kaplan, who had already thought of himself as a man who brought disasters like what everyone else thought. Angel Miss Cordelia must be an angel. Hook. Kaplan began to shed tears of emotion, because all his past sorrows burst out at once. See, Sir Kaplan. Thank you very much. When Kaplan sobbed as he clasped Cordelia's hand, Cordelia was flustered and broke into cold sweat. Why is he doing this? Did he notice that they used him as bait and was now trying to counterattack? While Cordelia's delusional circuits was weirdly turning because of her embarrassment, Jude was looking around them. The entrance of the Endymion capital. Jude entered the interior of a structure that looked like a gateway, and he recalled one by one the monsters that they had encountered on their way here. None of them were related to the demons. The Wild Fairy Queen's information was accurate. None of the monsters who lived in Raptor Canyon were directly related to the demons. Lacto. It was the lowest-ranking demon in contrast to the Tomb Guardian. It had appeared relatively recently. Not by the standards of the wild fairies who had a twisted sense of time, but by human standards. Then where did it come from? Who summoned it? Could there be a connection between Lena's death and the summoning of demons? The place where Lacto appeared was the underground of Endymion. Jude began to look around to search for a way to go underground, but it was then. Jude! Cordelia! We found it, Sir Kaplan found a way to the underground. Jude followed her voice as he went outside and saw Cordelia jumping, and the amazed Kaplan making a satisfied smile. It's surely Kaplan. He was a man who picks up artifacts, even if he falls down on the road. If Kaplan had found it, it would certainly be not an ordinary underground path. This way, I came across it by accident while tying my shoelaces. As expected of Sir Kaplan. With a broad smile, Jude peered down the stairs that were going underground, which was next to an altar. It was tightly sealed, and Cordelia had magically opened it. It's not on the map that we got from the wild fairies. It must be worth investigating. Jude immediately responded to Cordelia's whisper before he turned to Kaplan again. "Sir Kaplan, we're thinking of going down right away. Would that be all right?" "Yes, that's fine." "Then let's start right away." "Yeah." Jude was like Cordelia. Far from resenting Kaplan, he even suggested to continue together. To Kaplan, they were such a kind-hearted and good-natured man and woman. "I will take the lead." "Yes, be careful." Jude readily took the lead with Kaplan before he glanced at Cordelia. "What happened? He seems to be highly excited." "I don't know." Cordelia shook her head and shrugged her shoulders, and Jude tilted his head. "Is it because we're in the early stages?" The Kaplan in Legend of Heroes 2 was truly a man of steel. He always had a smile on his face, but it wasn't a sincere smile. It was a smile for building walls, not a smile for communication. He was a man with an impregnable fortress who didn't let anyone pass within a certain line. But the current Kaplan was very different. His attitude towards Jude and Cordelia were warm and tender. Perhaps because it's in the early stages. Kaplan had appeared in the middle stages of the game. "Let's go in quickly too." "Oh yes." Jude was somewhat convinced, and at Cordelia's urging, he followed and moved downwards. A dozen minutes passed like that. The stairs, which seemed to continue endlessly, finally came to an end. Having descended almost 100 meters down, they arrived at a huge underground temple. "Wow!" Cordelia exclaimed as she greatly increased the light of a magic orb, which she had used as a torch substitute. It was so dark that they couldn't identify everything around them, but the things that caught their eyes at that moment were amazing. The ceiling height was around 30 meters high. Large columns were erected all over the place, and magnificent sculptures were embossed on the pillars. The sculptures were probably the ancient elven gods that the inhabitants of Magellan, the Magic Kingdom, believed in. The Endymion capital. Kaplan approached the pillars in admiration. And it was at that moment. Jude and Cordelia almost simultaneously looked at their back. Jude sensed someone's presence. Cordelia felt her hair stand on end. A gaze that was hiding in the dark and looking their way. It wasn't a person. Neither was it a monster of this world. A pair of red eyes flashed. It silently took a step in the dark. Demon. No, a monster from hell. Jude held his breath. He inferred the height and shape of the monster from the size and height of the glowing eyes. It was around 4 meters tall. Judging from the size of the glowing eyes, it was a humanoid. Another silent step. No, it wasn't a step in the first place. Snake. Its lower body was like that of a snake's. Nazaurus. A monster from hell with the upper body of a human and a lower body of a snake. It was a higher species than Lacto. Moreover, it wasn't a monster that could be defeated by using tricks like how they defeated Lacto on the bridge. It's okay, we can fight against Nazaurus. Both Jude and Cordelia had grown a lot stronger. If the two were together, it was possible to fight it head-on. As long as it's not rare, no, as long as it's not named. Just as a snake's head was only one, the common Nazaurus only had one human upper body. But among the Nazaurus were those with 2 upper bodies. Cordelia nodded at Jude's words, but only for a moment. As long as it's not rare. Yes, if it's not rare. That was it. As he thought of the same thing as Cordelia, Jude turned his head and gazed at the pillar, and the Nazaurus in the dark couldn't wait any longer. Human, tear it to death. Human, kill and eat. 2 voices rang at the same time. Rare. It wasn't an ordinary rare monster either. There was a horn in the middle of the forehead, proving that it was a named monster. Kaplan. The Kaplan effect. As if responding to Jude's babble, the Nazaurus that was named Caracola raised its voice. It charged towards Jude and Cordelia. It's not Kaplan's fault. Kaplan's ability was to attract rare monsters like the rare and named monsters, and not to create them. In other words, it was to attract rare or named monsters among the monsters scattered all over the place, and not to strengthen ordinary monsters into rare or named ones. It had been here from the very beginning. This happened because the named Nazarus was in Endymion's underground from the start. So it's not Kaplan's fault. But still. Here it comes. Cordelia quickly shouted, and Jude focused on the battle before him. He could hear the startled Kaplan screaming behind his back. Named Nazarus. Caracola, Kara and Cola. Rare, and they have one body. Named are capable of dividing itself, also have a special ability. That was it. Caracola's figure was fully revealed from the darkness. It had the upper bodies of a naked man and woman, and its lower body was that of a giant snake monster. Both of them were monsters from hell, so they looked very evil. Carter, the male monster with a spear and shield, Cola, opened his mouth wide and spewed out fire. To avoid the flames that spread out in a straight line, Jude and Cordelia split as they ran to the sides, and the woman holding a cane, Kara, chanted the spell as if she had waited for it. Metamorphosis. At that instant, a tremendous amount of life engulfed all the darkness underground. Jude and Cordelia knew Caracola's pattern, so they had closed their eyes just before the light burst to prevent sight loss, and thus, they lost the opportunity to track Caracola's movement for a while. Therefore, Jude used his sense of hearing. He tried to figure out the movement of Caracola by the sound. Og eyes, my eyes. But it wasn't easy, because Kaplan had screamed from behind his back and rolled on the floor. Bang! There was a loud noise. It was at their front. At the same time, Jude felt their murderous aura. After having opened the third door of the ninth heaven's 9 doors, his sharpened senses filled in the gaps of his hearing and sight. His eyes were closed, but he could somehow sense in the darkness that Caracola had divided itself into 2. Wag. A sharp attack pierced through the air. Jude avoided the attack with minimal movement at the exact timing, opened his eyes, and then clenched his teeth. This was due to the unexpected situation happening in front of him. Cordelia. Cordelia was in front of him. To be exact, it was Kara who had transformed into Cordelia. The special ability of the named Nazarus was transformation. It wasn't just a transformation that only mimicked the appearance. With the power of the horns on their foreheads, they were able to glimpse at their opponent's memories and mind, and then use it to create an ideal look that was more real than the real person. They usually transform into a lover or a colleague who were with the victim. It wasn't quite a great ability in the game, but in reality, it was clearly different. Jude. It was Cordelia's voice. Moreover, the Cordelia in front of him had wet hair. It seemed to have taken the form of Cordelia when she was bathing under the moonlight in order to lure the fall fairies. It was the appearance of Cordelia that Jude had thought was the most beautiful. Jude was suddenly filled with embarrassment as he thought that his innermost feelings had been laid bare. Jude, let's play, okay? Speaking in a Cordelia-like tone, Kara drew closer to Jude. It was not an exaggeration to say that her approach was full of gaps, but just before he used his fist, Jude stopped and hesitated. Damn! His mind knew that it wasn't Cordelia. But still, it was Cordelia's face and voice. He felt a strong reluctance to hit her, and at that decisive moment, he instinctively hesitated. His attacks didn't hit, or his attack speed slowed down, and Kara broke into that gap. Will you hit Cordelia? Kara tilted her head and said while she created magic blades that moved in the air, and Jude clenched his teeth again. By using the 24 gale steps, he made a dash and avoided the magic blades that rushed in to kill him. Whirlwind. The 7 whirlwinds surrounding Jude suddenly shot forward and blew away the magic blades. In that short moment, it created a path between Jude and Kara. Gale. Jude rushed forward. After narrowing their distance at once, he tried to use the Holy Cross punch on Kara's abdomen. But it was impossible. Again, he hesitated just before the attack. I don't want to be hurt. Kara shouted in Cordelia's voice, and his attack went awry, which was enough for Kara. As a monster from hell, she dodged Jude's fist and blew her breath onto Jude at a close distance. I love you so much. Along with those sweet words, poison penetrated into Jude's body. Jude hurriedly chanted the mnemonic chant of the ninth heaven's 9 doors and activated the energy of his whole body. It wasn't an overstatement that the energy inside Jude was unrivaled in its clearness and purity, that it not only repelled the poison, but also completely purified it. Hi. Jude attacked again with a shout, and Kara quickly stepped back and evaded Jude's attack. Jude's attack lost its usual sharpness, but he couldn't help it. This won't do. It was more difficult than he thought. Even though it was just her appearance, he kept reacting to it. What about Cordelia? Jude was primarily good at fighting, but he was now struggling like this, so it was natural that he was worried about Cordelia. Despite being in the middle of a fight, Jude diverted his gaze to the side and saw it. No, he ended up seeing it. This is so good. It wasn't Kara but the real Cordelia. Kara and Cordelia actually said the same words in Korean, and that was why the next sentence clarified that it was the real Cordelia and not Kara. Jota can both mean love and good in Korean. However, Kara's words were more of seducing or enticing Jude, so I used the love for the translation, while Cordelia's words were more of her feeling good about the current situation, so I used the good meaning. She excitedly laughed and one-sidedly cornered Cola. Beat hit more, beat hit more. A storm of magic attacks raged. Cola got hit by more than 10 magic bullets, and Cordelia clenched her fist. As if this was not enough, she bolted towards Cola and shouted, Die, Jude. Hey! The real Jude exclaimed, but Cordelia didn't pay him any attention. He looked exactly like Jude but was not Jude. This was such a good situation. I don't have to control my strength. She struck him with full power. She hit him with the determination to really kill him. This is for Hong Yoo-Hee. Strengthen. Strengthen. Smite. Smite. Due to the spell's echo, the strengthen and smite spells were cast in succession. Cordelia's fist struck Cola's abdomen with frightful precision, and Cola even vomited blood from the intense impact. This is for Yellow Storm. Cordelia's roundhouse kick exploded. It wasn't just a roundhouse kick, but an attack that struck Cola's neck like a guillotine. She used smite again this time. Thud. Cola's head hit the floor, but Cordelia did not stop. This is for Cordelia. She stamped on Cola's back, and it seemed to be a little weaker than her previous 2 attacks, either because of her mood or of the reality. Dies, dies, die. At any rate, Cordelia repeated her lethal attacks without any hesitation, and Cola groaned in pain. Hey, that's too much. It was when Jude shouted, Jaya! Cordelia's magic bullet flew at a terrifying speed. As he managed to avoid the attack by rolling down the floor, Cordelia said with a calm face, I thought you were a mob. He looked just like Cola, whom she was stepping on now. Cordelia focused on attacking Cola again while Jude trembled, and Kara, who had unknowingly watched all that had happened, said with Cordelia's face, she's your fiancée, right? Without affirming or denying it, Jude vigorously raised his strength and ran towards Kara. However, Kara didn't attack Jude. It was because Cola's condition was too serious. Reunion. As Kara shouted loudly, a tremendous light burst again, and Jude urgently closed his eyes to prevent being blinded. Ow, my eyes, my eyes. Hearing Kaplan's screams, Jude expanded his senses. He then felt Cordelia approaching him. Are you okay? I'm not okay. What, were you hit? They're weak when they're divided. No, it's not that. It was because of his feelings for a certain someone. But Jude swallowed down what he wanted to say and looked straight ahead again. Caracola, the named Nazarus. But it was quite different from before. Unlike Kara, who looked fine, Cola's whole body was covered in blood. Wow, you barely hurt her, fighting, Gimoti, really. Gimoti makes an appearance again, this time. Cordelia is saying that Jude is bad at fighting since birth. Jude began to tremble again at Cordelia's words, but he soon calmed himself down. No, he clenched his fists in burning fury. I'll take on Cola. Caracola was still transformed into them, and he detested it. It was somehow strange, but if it looked like him, Jude could hit it without hesitation, but Cordelia opposed it. You want me to hit Cordelia? That's a bit difficult. Then let's just hit both of them. Yes, that would be good. Cordelia grinned and used the spell's echo to create more than 10 magic bullets at once, and Jude kicked the ground. Gale! It was literally a raging dash. Nazarus, a monster from hell, was not an easy opponent, but Jude and Cordelia had risen in level after they defeated powerful enemies at a rapid pace. Moreover, the combination of Chunmujic and Ninth Heaven's 9 doors was truly like a cheat. Wag. The true strength of 24 Gale steps was in the whirlwinds and Gale. It wasn't simply just a footwork technique that was as fast as the wind. Golden whirlwinds rose and not only blocked the enemy's attack, but also controlled the enemy's movement. Die! Cola spewed out fire, and Kara sent a barrage of magic blades. But none of those could hurt Jude. The whirlwinds blew away the magic blades, and the gale twisted the trajectory of the flames. Cordelia's flying spells made Caracola unable to focus on attacking. They're buying time. As Cordelia had said, Kara and Cola were weak when divided. But they were now weak even when combined, because Cola's injuries were severe. Their reunion and use of ranged attacks instead of close combat were all aimed at buying Cola some time to recover. So don't let them buy time. Hit them with the strongest attack. Black Dragon Release Technique. No, Black Dragon Release Technique was simply not enough. Jude! Cordelia cried out, and Jude read the wind. Kara's magic blade flew as it aimed for his head, but Jude lightly moved his head to avoid it before he stepped on the wind. As if gliding, he leapt towards Caracola and created a golden vortex in his left hand. Quulo! The wind pulled Cola. Kara tried to hit Jude, but Cordelia immediately responded. Evil Eye. It was the power that the white snake in Frost Anvil had. The pupils in Cordelia's blue eyes sharply turned into slits, causing not only Kara, but also Cola's movement to be temporarily stopped. Now, Jude drew his fist. He focused his sacred battle aura on his fist. The opponent was a monster from hell. So the sacred battle aura and the holy cross skills were nothing but poison to them. However, the holy cross punch wasn't enough. Its power was weak. So he had to add strength. He applied the power of the Ninth Heaven's 9 doors to strengthen the holy cross punch. Ninth Heaven's 9 doors improved form. Black Dragon Cross Strike. The golden cross became pitch black. The huge pitch black cross was released from his fists and crushed Kara and Cola. Boom! The ground was destroyed. Its giant snake lower body was smashed at once. And lastly, there was still one shot left. Using the recall from the releasing of the pitch black cross, Jude rotated in the air, filled himself with the dragon's energy, and struck down like a lightning bolt. His heel that was full of the black dragon's power smashed Cola's head. Boom! Their transformation was released. At the moment of Cola's death, Kara also died since they shared one body, and when the monster from hell died, the air around them fluctuated, just like when demonic humans died. Hulu! Jude let out a long breath as he looked down on Caracola, who had turned into ashes. A series of pure white rings surrounded Jude. Then Cordelia's voice came. Wow, your new skill is awesome. What's the new one called? She came running and then asked with brightly shining eyes. It was the real Cordelia. The real one and not the fake. Tara. Why are you sighing? You did well. She tilted her head as she asked, and her appearance was really cute. I must be seriously ill. What, have you been poisoned? Should I use recovery? No, it's nothing. What nothing? If you want to say something, just say it. Are you upset because you couldn't fight? At Cordelia's question, Jude shut his mouth at once, and soon scratched the back of his head and said, No, that. That what? So that. I understand. Are you upset that I hit you without hesitation? Is that it, am I right? Ahem, ahem. Cordelia laughed at Jude, clearing his throat before she shrugged her shoulders. But it was too obvious. Too obvious. It's fake, well, how should I say it? My instincts say it's not Jude. My intuition told me that it smells different. Smell? Yes, it smelled different from you. Jude frowned at Cordelia's explanation. Instinct, intuition, and smell. It was certainly very much like Cordelia. Indeed, you're a real beast. Do you want me to kill you? When Cordelia growled, Jude cleared his throat, because he was relieved after hearing her explanation. By the way, you really didn't injure it. You found it cute. Can't you do anything because it's my face? Because I'm a gentleman. Bullsh asterisk T. Cordelia cursed, but she had a big smile on her face. One way or another, she seemed to be pleased with Jude's behavior. Anyway, we defeated it. Yes, we defeated it. I think we've really gotten stronger. It was something natural when they thought about it. All of the enemies that they had defeated while on the way here were of a higher level than Jude or Cordelia. Therefore, Jude and Cordelia were able to quickly grow stronger, beyond belief. But Jude, will we continue to go with Kaplan from now on? When Cordelia spoke in a low voice as she peered at Kaplan, who had fainted under a low pillar some distance away, Jude nodded his head. We should. As you know, Kaplan's ability is not to create named monsters. He attracts those that already exist. Perhaps if we came here even without Kaplan, we would still have fought the named Nazarus. If you think so, then so be it. It seems like you're not doing any thinking nowadays. Because I have Jude Wiki. Cordelia proudly spoke as she posed with her chest out. Afterwards, she looked back at Caracola, who had completely turned into ash, except for the horns that could be called drop items. Then, we'll continue to go together with him. We will. It's much better to use Kaplan's discovery ability, if we're going to encounter rare mobs anyway. That's a relief. Huh. No, I thought that Kaplan would suffer a lot if we left him. Wouldn't it somehow be more troubling for the one who took him along? Nazarus appeared after Lacto. There was no knowing how many more monsters or demons were hiding in the underground of Endymion. Well, let's think about that as we go. We need to save Lena too. In the first place, Kaplan would have already been prepared to come all the way here to the Wild Lands. You're right. Jude nodded before he picked up the horns of Nazarus, which were dropped by Caracola. It was an excellent item that could show a glimpse of other people's memories, depending on whether it was processed or not. It's worth the trouble. Gaining experience was also quite good. Jude grinned as she said to Cordelia, Let's go wake up Kaplan and continue moving. There might be other monsters who have heard the sounds of fighting. Yes, sir. Cordelia saluted like a soldier and ran towards Kaplan, and Jude turned around as he stared beyond the darkness from where Caracola came out. Lacto and the named Nazarus, Caracola. Why were they here? Who summoned them? It's Lena, the hero of the first episode of Legend of Heroes, who had died in Endymion. Jude turned back towards Cordelia. He stepped forward to help her pull the groaning Kaplan. At a different place at the same time, Gar, El and Adelia were heading towards the village of the gentle Snow Breeze tribe at a time when Jude and Cordelia were traveling with the fainted Kaplan. However, their positions were a little different from usual. Ahem, ahem, is it uncomfortable? It's fine, what about Lord Gar, El? I'm fine too. Red Gale had given them only one stag, male deer. Gar El stiffly sat in front as he looked forward, and Adelia buried her face on Gar El's back as she thought with her lips curled up. It couldn't be helped. Because the wild land was unbelievably cold, they had to rely on each other's body temperature. Moreover, it would be a disaster if she fell off the deer. Yes, that's it, it's a rational and valid enough reason. Having convinced herself, Adelia's lips curled up again, and she hugged Gar El's waist a little stronger. And in another place. In a place near the border. Inside the territory of the Len Kingdom. It was place for a man who did not know that Jude and Cordelia, as well as Gar El and Adelia, have already crossed the border. There is nothing like this that could invigorate the body, just a bottle of this wood. Count Chase's eyes narrowed at the words of the merchant, who continued his passionate explanation while turning here and there. What was in front of him was a special potion made by processing a giant eel, which was said to be only caught in the northern part of the Len Kingdom. This is a secret, but my brother-in-law ate this and now he had twins. Ahem. As Count Chase's eyes narrowed even more, the excitedly talking merchant shut his mouth. Although he diligently and loudly spoke about his wares, the existence of Count Chase seemed scary. He was tall and had a well-trained body, which was unimaginable for a wizard. His terrifying eyes and serious expression seemed to be able to kill 1 or 2 people with just a look of his eyes. Give me. Yes. Give me 2. 2. 2. 2, not 1. 1 might not be enough. Thank you, I'll wrap it up right away. Count Chase nodded to the merchant who started packing the potions, and his mind was briefly troubled. He had concerns regarding the whereabouts of Gar, Elle and Adelia, as well as Jude and Cordelia, but what occupied his mind now was something different. I need to get a new bag. The bag that he brought was already full before he knew it. As he slowly nodded his head, Count Chase turned his attention to the other items on the shelves. He couldn't just put 2 bottles in his new bag. What is that? Speaking of that. The merchant's explanation continued again, and Count Chase listened with a serious attitude, as a small but satisfied smile came to his face. Episode 83, RETURNES 1. Jude and Cordelia entered one of the empty rooms near the entrance, and sat down in a corner after thoroughly searching the surrounding area. They were behind a large fallen stone pillar, which hid them from sight when viewed from the entrance of the room. Shall we wake him up now? When Jude nodded at her question that was said in a low voice, Cordelia immediately placed her hand on the fainted Kaplan's forehead. Awake! Gasp! As soon as the awake spell was cast, Kaplan opened his eyes at once and gasped. How acty this is, what about the snake, what about the monster? Jude and I defeated it, so please calm down, it's safe here. Cordelia gently smiled and spoke in a soft tone, and Kaplan gulped and nodded his head. Have you calmed down? Yes, I've calmed down, I'm fine. Kaplan nodded as his cheeks slightly flushed, and Jude, who had been quietly watching, cut in. Ahem, Sir Kaplan. Jude, no, Sir Jude. You can just call me Jude. Then Jude. Kaplan was, for some unknown reason, fidgeting. He wondered if Kaplan was bashful and enamored of Cordelia's beautiful face which transcended race, but that was thoroughly Jude's opinion. There seemed to be something else. Sir Kaplan? Cordelia asked as she tilted her head, and Kaplan tightly clenched his fists and breathed several times before he made a resolution. He prostrated as if he had made a mistake and then said, It's all my fault. The moment they came down to the underground, they met a powerful monster. Furthermore, it was Kaplan himself who found the way down to the underground. Cordelia smiled and said that they defeated it, but it must not have been easy. She might not know it, but it must have been a life-threatening fight. I'm really sorry, I'm really, really sorry. All of this happened because of Kaplan himself. Because these things always happened wherever Kaplan goes. As he desperately apologized, Kaplan thought, what would happen if even Cordelia and Jude hate him? No matter how kind-hearted the two were like angels, in the end, the two were still humans. It might be better to go on separate ways like this. He thought that he wouldn't be able to stand it if Cordelia told him that she didn't want to accompany him anymore, or that this was really Kaplan's fault himself. Let's go on separate ways. Let's move separately. It's better that way. It's right to do so. So, it's okay, Sir Kaplan, it's not your fault. Kaplan flinched, he had no choice but to flinch. Cordelia's voice was the same as before. No, it was rather become more kind than last time. But, Cordelia is right. Jude helped raise Kaplan up, and then looked at him straight into the eyes. His eyes were full of fear. Yet his eyes were like that of a child who had not given up hope for their kindness. Is that it? Jude realized it now. The Kaplan who appeared in the middle of Legend of Heroes 2 was always smiling, but he never allowed anyone to be near his heart. Although it was possible to compel him to follow like stalking, it was impossible to make him a companion. Because the wounds were repeated. Because he had closed his heart due to not wanting to be hurt anymore. He was a man who always pretended to be bright and had a false smile, but his insides were tormented, and he felt worthless and empty. But not yet. It was possible to change Kaplan's future now. Of course it may be useless meddling, but even so. And one more. Jude glanced back at Cordelia. Her gaze at Kaplan was full of sadness. So he had to say it. He had to protect Kaplan's heart for Cordelia's sake. Is Sir Kaplan a god? Yes. You're literally a god. That like a god of disasters. It's not like that, a true god, or someone with divine powers. Kaplan shook his head at Jude's serious question. No. Yes, Kaplan is just an ordinary dwarf. No, you're special because you became a lifelong professor at the Institutional Academy at such a young age, but you're still a dwarf. It was not a disparaging remark. It was an enumeration of facts. You are not God, you may have bad luck, but that's it. Does Sir Kaplan create monsters? Can you create and summon monsters that do not exist? No, it's not, that's impossible. Sir Kaplan is not a god, but a dwarf. You just ran into the monsters who were originally there. Kaplan bit his lips. A faint smile was drawn on Jude's face. It's not Sir Kaplan's fault. Saying that it's Kaplan's fault, that's rather arrogant. Who is Sir Kaplan? He's just a dwarf with moist and attractive eyes. Kaplan's eyes turned red at Jude's words. It wasn't much, but Jude had told him the words he really wanted to hear, and what no one else had said. So don't apologize anymore, okay? Okay, I understand. Kaplan sniffled and replied before he eventually broke down in tears, and Jude patted Kaplan on the shoulder and turned to Cordelia. Good job. Cordelia gave a thumbs up and widely smiled, and Jude was satisfied. After patting Kaplan on the shoulder once again, a small smile formed on his face. Cordelia's smile was kept, but it was also because of his own feelings of satisfaction about something in his mind. A complete happy ending. The best ending where everyone was happy. Jude smiled again at the thought that came to his mind, and he waited for Kaplan's crying to cease. And a dozen minutes later. Are you fine now? I'm fine, I've shown you something embarrassing. It's okay, it's just between us. Cordelia mischievously laughed and said, and Kaplan began to be flustered as his cheeks reddened again, and Jude cut in for the second time. Ahem, anyway, Sir Kaplan. Yes, Jude. We plan to continue the exploration as it is. Jude and Cordelia had yet to find any clues about Lena. They absolutely couldn't leave Endymion while that was the case. But not for Kaplan. This is the second time we've encountered a monster from hell in Endymion. Perhaps there are a few more of those monsters roaming around Endymion. It was a very dangerous place. At Jude's explanation, Kaplan gulped and nodded his head, because he roughly understood what Jude was trying to say. Let's go back. Because he would only be a burden if they went together. Okay. That's why this is our selfish request from here on. Sir Kaplan, will you continue to explore with us? Yes. It is as we had said. Cordelia and I belong to the Academy, but we are still very inexperienced. It would be a great help if you could join us as a veteran archaeologist, Sir Kaplan. Jude wasn't just talking with the Kaplan effect in mind. Endymion was an area that did not even appear as a cinematic movie in Legend of the Heroes 2. Therefore, even if Jude and Cordelia were rotten waters, they would inevitably have difficulties in exploration. Even if Jude was knowledgeable about stars, he knew little about archaeology or exploring ruins. But Kaplan was different. Kaplan's archaeological knowledge and exploration experience would definitely be of great help. May I ask you a favor? Please. Kaplan immediately nodded when Cordelia spoke at the end. Because it was the first time he was asked to continue the expedition together, despite already having an accident once. No, that's not all. He wanted to be helpful to Jude and Cordelia. He thought he could do anything for the two who were like angels that came down on earth. I'm not good enough, but I'll be with you. I'll try to help. As Kaplan's eyes burned with enthusiasm, Jude was satisfied, and Cordelia breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, he didn't lose his motivation. You're right. In any case, Cordelia was kind. After thinking about Cordelia again, Jude proceeded with the conversation. I'm thinking of going inside a little more. The map of Endymion that we found does not show this place, but I think it is roughly connected in this way when viewed on a larger scale. Jude opened the map and talked, and Kaplan nodded with a very serious face, while Cordelia took a step back and began to look around. Thinking was Jude's role. And in fact, Jude was thinking of several things at the same time. One of them was the origin of the monsters from hell that began to appear in Endymion's underground. The most likely is a demon summoning. Over 1,000 years had already passed since Endymion's destruction. It was hard to think that the demons who had destroyed Endymion in the past would still have remained here. If they were summoned, was it the Devil's Eye? The Devil's Eye were the only demon followers who were active in the wild lands. But then there was something that was a little strange. Why did they summon the demon in Endymion? Wouldn't it have been better to do the summoning in the main camp or the land of the attacking wild gods? A considerable sacrifice was needed for demon summoning, and sacrifices didn't just rise from the ground. In a larger scale, it was a commodity that was scarce after all. What I can think of is the distinct characteristics of Endymion. It was the land where the Overlord of Hell came down in the past. Maybe it was a land that had something advantageous for summoning demons. The Devil's Eye, the newly summoned demons, and Lena. Lena fought to the death in Raptor Canyon, not Endymion. Maybe she had a big fight against the Devil's Eye and the demons in Endymion's underground. As a result, she wiped out the demons in Endymion, but she was also seriously injured and ended up losing her life. It was quite a plausible hypothesis, but in the end, it was only a hypothesis. He had to move to confirm the truth. Let's begin again. They finished talking about the route while they were taking some rest. Go. I'll take the lead. Cordelia and Kaplan stood up from their spots and said, and Jude nodded his head. Although Kaplan fainted in every battle, he was a man who had overcome many crises. They were able to easily proceed while carefully not making any sounds. Thus, 30 minutes passed. Jude praised himself for his decision to join Kaplan, because Kaplan discovered a secret path that was hidden in the dead end. This way, since it was a secret door frequented by the slender elves, it was a little hard for Kaplan, whose body was shaped like a keg, but it was not to the point where he couldn't pass through it. It seems like a real secret passage. It's like a drama theater. As she whispered very small on Jude's ear, Cordelia pointed at their feet. There was a floor about 7 meters down, and where the party was standing now was above the ceiling with holes on it. Although it was a stone floor, it reminded Cordelia of the scaffolding that hung from the ceiling of the theater. I'll keep going. It was the moment when Kaplan expressed his intention using a hand signal instead of speaking as he began to take a step. Paralyze silent. Cordelia hurriedly reached out to Kaplan and cast 2 spells, while Jude held his breath and focused his consciousness on his hearing. They had heard footsteps. Jude and Cordelia had become more sensitive to things happening on the ground than before, perhaps due to the earth protection. Monsters! It wasn't 1 or 2. There seemed to be about a dozen monsters like Lacto and Nazarus that were moving together. It was more than they imagined. Moreover, seeing the magic lights lit up everywhere, it was highly likely that they had been using this path for a long time. Let's wait. The group let them pass by. No matter how strong Jude and Cordelia were, that number was too much. Cordelia nodded at Jude's eye signal. Kaplan couldn't move because he was paralyzed, but thanks to that, he was able to stay still. They stood still like that. They waited for the monsters to pass by. Sailing! A Nazarus suddenly shouted, and the Lactos wielded their whips at once. It was right under their feet, so they didn't even have time to react. Crash! The ceiling collapsed. Jude hurriedly flew with Kaplan in his arms after Cordelia cast Fly Magic. It was impossible to go back the way they came from because of the lactose whipping here and there. Boom, thud, crash. Debris fell and crashed onto the floor. Because of that, some of the Nazaruses and lactose were distracted as they avoided the falling rocks, and Jude and Cordelia used that opportunity. Run! An all-out battle was too much. As soon as he touched the floor, Jude ran like a gale, and Cordelia repeatedly chanted spells right after casting haste several times. Grace, freeze, earth walls. She made the floor slippery. She froze the air to make a thin wall of ice and made the floor rise to block the path. However, all of these were just temporary measures. The lactose avoided the greased area by flying low, and then literally threw themselves to destroy the ice wall and the rising floor. Continue. But it was not without effect. To widen the distance even a little, Cordelia continued to cast spells. Jude ran while carrying Kaplan as he checked the surroundings. It's a place on the map. It was in his memory. So he could imagine the path they should take. Earth wall, earth wall. She even mobilized the spell's echo, and in an instant, 4 layers of stone walls were created. Jude thought of an escape route, or to be exact, a route where they could get rid of those who were following them. Because it was a path that forked into 2, their pursuers would have to make a good choice. But it was at that moment. This way. A sharp voice rang in their minds. It was message, magic. Who was it? Where did it come from? Over there. Cordelia figured it out through her instincts. Jude turned his gaze, and at that moment, a stone wall that was much larger than Cordelia's rose from the floor. Bowing. The stone wall that rose with a terrifying speed, then crashed into the ceiling. A succession of clouds that came from somewhere covered the stone wall. Hurry! It was the message, magic once again. This way. Cordelia ran, and Jude erased the map from his head. Her beastly instinct was also an intuition, but she was a wizard. Her ability to feel and understand magic was far superior than that of Jude. Boom! Loud noises came from their backs. At the same time, they also heard the roars of the monsters. They had to hurry. Jude looked straight ahead, and Cordelia pulled on Jude's shoulder. Like that, he threw himself straight at the wall on his side. Swoosh! It wasn't the noise of an impact. Instead of crashing into the wall, Jude and Cordelia went past through the wall and crashed into the floor. Gark! Kaplan squawked as he fell on his stomach, and while protecting Cordelia in a hurry, or to be exact, Jude hugged her and put her on top of himself. Having succeeded in protecting her, Jude breathed a sigh of relief. And above such Jude's chest, Cordelia raised her head and swallowed her breath. She swiftly raised her upper body from Jude's chest. What happened? No, he understood. Therefore, with Cordelia still on his chest, Jude turned his head and looked at the same place as her. The reason why Cordelia swallowed her breath. The person who made her cheeks blush in excitement. Lena, a blonde woman with a grey hood over her head, stood before their eyes. Episode 84, Reincarnated 2. Lena. Her full name is Lena Ainsberg. She was the favourite disciple of Bardo Ainsberg, a royal wizard of the Paragon Kingdom. For Bardo, who had been single all his life, she was no different from a real daughter, and the orphan Lena also treated Bardo like her real father. Though her beginnings in magic were relatively late, she had an earnest desire to repay Bardo's guidance in cultivating her innate magic talent, and perhaps most importantly, his self-sacrifice for her. She officially earned the wizard position at the very young age of 15, and then entered the Grey Tower, where Bardo also studied at, and accomplished the feat of completing the whole scholastic course in just 3 years. Master. 18. The still young girl went home to meet her beloved teacher and father, Bardo, with a smile on her face. It was unimaginable for her that the end of her journey would be marked by tragedy. When Jude recalled the story of Lena that was depicted in the first episode of Legend of Heroes, Cordelia gasped and stared at Lena. It's really Lena. She was Lena whom she liked after Cordelia. Or rather, if Lena had actually been a playable character in Legend of Heroes 2, Yellow Storm would have been greatly troubled in choosing between Cordelia and Lena. So when Cordelia faced the real Lena in person, her head went blank in that instant. I like her so much. She just liked her so much. She was so happy because she liked her so much. Cordelia was smiling so affectionately to the extent that Jude, who looked at her, felt like his heart ached. But Lena didn't see what Cordelia and Jude were feeling underneath. This place is dangerous. There is no guarantee that I can help you several times, so please leave this city as soon as possible. With her hood down, she blurted those words and turned around, becoming light and disappearing before Jude and Cordelia could say anything. Lena! Cordelia urgently cried, but she was already gone. White light particles scattered, as if the fact that Lena had just stood there was just an illusion itself. Shadow magic. Or to be exact, shadow clone arts. It was a magic that created a doppelganger, and was one of Lena's ultimate skills that can be learned in the last half of the first episode of Legend of Heroes. She was originally able to make it only within her field of view. Now they couldn't even guess how far the main body was from the doppelganger. It seemed that Landius and Camille were not the only ones who became monsters in 10 years. Lena. As Cordelia was about to cry, Jude turned his head back to her and said, It's still a sign, because it means that Lena is alive and that she is certainly somewhere in Endymion. It was not too late yet. There was still a chance to save Lena. At Jude's explanation, Cordelia quickly looked at him. Can you find where she is? I can find her, so can you get off me first? It wasn't because she was that heavy or that he hated it, but he'd be able to move more freely once he got up. Cordelia quickly nodded, got off Jude's chest, and then sat down. Ah, right, Sir Kaplan, are you all right? MMF. Kaplan still had paralyze and silent cast on him. Feeling sorry for Kaplan wriggling on the floor, Cordelia hurried to him. I'm sorry, I'll release you in a minute. MMF. While Cordelia released the magic spells on Kaplan, Jude stood up and focused his attention beyond the illusionary wall. Fortunately, he could not feel the presence of monsters. Lena's magic seemed to have tricked them into going somewhere else. Is this illusionary wall originally part of Endymion itself? Something that originally existed in Endymion, and not made by Lena herself? Did Lena activate it, or was it activated when the monsters awakened the functions of Endymion? There were magical lights in the hallways where the monsters passed. Whether it was Lena, the monsters, or the Devil's Eyes who wanted to summon monsters, someone seemed to have restored Endymion's city facilities. Lena must be somewhere in Endymion. Lena used expressions such as "this place is dangerous" and "leave this city." If Lena was outside the city, she would have used expressions such as "the city," "that place," or "there." It sounds like a simple pun, but her words are understandable. Tien, the city, that place, and "there" all sound similar in Korean, though I personally feel that it's more of a tongue twister than a pun. Lena was somewhere in Endymion. Then where was she? What was she doing in Endymion, and what is going on in Endymion? Angel's feather. There was a white feather in the place where Lena disappeared. It was not ordinary bird feather, but was evidently that of the angel Lena's feather. Is that the core of her doppelganger? It was when Jude was looking at the white feather that was slightly emitting light. Jude. Having even cast a recovery magic on Kaplan, Cordelia approached him in quick steps. As soon as Jude turned around, she hastily spoke. Lena came to help us because we were in danger, right? So if we're in danger again, won't Lena appear? It was quite a plausible suggestion. It was possible if Lena's character was as good as the saint in stories. But Jude shook his head right away. It's too dangerous. There was no guarantee that Lena could respond to every danger. Lena didn't even appear when they fought the named Nazarus back then. But let's find another way. If this was a game, he would have accepted Cordelia's suggestion. But this was reality. Even if he knew that it was the only way, he couldn't gamble with his only life. Cordelia, that's Lena's feather. Would it be possible to use that to trace her? Cordelia frowned at Jude's expectant question, and soon shook her head. That's unreasonable. I can't think of any magic that I can use for that now. Is that so? That if it's tracing back, there's a way. At those last words, Jude and Cordelia simultaneously turned their heads. The barely recovered Kaplan wiped his sweaty head and stuttered. I'm not sure, but have you ever heard of the name Bellagio? Bellagio. Jude and Cordelia blinked once and then looked at each other. Nobody said anything first. Czar. Jude, Miss Cordelia. When Kaplan felt left out between the two who could communicate with just their eyes, Jude opened his mouth again. Bellagio, that's right, Bellagio, there was that. Will we find Lena if we had Bellagio? I guess. There was even a feather here. As Jude nodded, Cordelia jumped up from her position and ran straight to Kaplan, hugging his head. You're the best, Kaplan. I'm glad Kaplan's here. Ahem. With his head buried in Cordelia's chest, Kaplan blushed and cleared his throat, and Jude's eyes narrowed as he counted numbers. 1, 2, 3. This was enough. Jude stealthily came closer and stopped the hug by pulling Cordelia's arm before he quickly spoke. So Kaplan is right. If we have Bellagio, we can find Lena. But that we have to first look for Bellagio. Although he promptly said it, it was actually not easy to find Bellagio. Kaplan himself knew little about the Bellagio's habitat somewhere in Raptor Canyon. But not for Jude and Cordelia. I know where Bellagio is. I know exactly who has Bellagio and how to meet them. Mystical beast Bellagio. A magical beast who could track even small traces of mana, as small as fingernails. Oh, is that true? It's true. Cordelia replied with a big smile and looked back at Jude to confirm, and Jude nodded his head. Because they were the ones who raised the Bellagio's inn, Legend of Heroes. So he assumed that they would have raised it here in reality. Where should we go? It's clear that something big has happened to Endymion, given that the monsters are going around like this. Getting out of the city may not be easy. Unlike Jude and Cordelia, Kaplan was absolutely lacking information on their current situation, but he was not a lifelong professor at the institutional academy for no reason. Despite their insufficient information, Jude smiled big and replied in a coherent manner. We don't have to go out of the city completely. We can go to a place that is marked on the map. What's more, it's not too far away. Having said that, Jude opened Endymion's map for Cordelia and Kaplan, and Cordelia soon pointed to a place marked by a checkmark. We have to go here. There, what is there? When Kaplan blinked and asked, Jude and Cordelia exchanged glances, and soon, Cordelia placed her hands on her hips and said, Bathhouse. How's the temperature? Just good. How about your blindfold? I can't see anything, so I might fall. Can I take it off for a second? HMPH, no. Cordelia giggled and looked elsewhere before she said, Sir Kaplan, please be patient, even if it feels uncomfortable. It's all right. Inside the bathhouse located outside Endymion. Just like the hot springs in the canyon, this place was well maintained. Jude and Kaplan sat on an empty bathtub with blindfolds on, while Cordelia prepared to take a bath in front of a bathtub filled with hot water. Now then, shall we start? After entering the bathtub, Cordelia began washing herself with hot water. It was an act that was questionable, since monsters from hell were wandering around Endymion's underground, but in fact, it could be called a very important ceremony. Hum tilde. The humming Cordelia began to wash her hair, and Jude cleared his throat and said, Cordelia, are you going to keep bathing? Tusk, I'm just washing my hair. The chance to take a hot bath didn't just come at any time. Cordelia washed her hair with great care, deeply took a breath, and then uttered a magic spell to call the fairies. Twinkle, twinkle little star tilde, shining beautifully tilde in the western sky tilde a, they came. She was used to it by now. Wow, so pretty. Really pretty. But haven't we met her before? We have met. The last one was Cordelia. After getting up from the bathtub, she dried her body with magic and told the wild fairies looking up at her with sparkling eyes. Would you like to play with me? That's surprising. What are we going to play? As the wild fairies jumped and shouted in the bathtub, Cordelia slowly nodded. After peeking at Kaplan and Jude, who flinched at the voices of the fairies, she dressed herself and then said, First, let's see the Queen. The Queen. The Queen. A villainous smile spread over Cordelia's face. The wild fairy queen. Having rich blonde hair like that of a lion's mane, she was lying in bed and relaxing. She was a fairy one way or another, but if the other fairies were kids, as a queen, she was a girl. Therefore, she had not yet fully recovered from the aftermath of a stormy pair who had swept through them just a while ago. I feel tired. It was mental fatigue and not physical fatigue. A subtle feeling of having solved a problem but not having solved it. She felt dejected every time she saw the almost empty warehouse of the High Elves. No, it's not something that we can use in the first place. There was something, though. There was something that she really felt. Anyway, it's all over. That's it. Yes, that's it. The fairy queen thought like a fairy and tried to fall into a deep sleep. But it was at that moment. Queen! 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 The fairy queen opened her eyes in surprise at the sounds of the fairies calling her, and was even more surprised that she fell out of her bed. Because there was a beautiful human girl among the fairies. Queen, I missed you. When Cordelia brightly smiled, her face was so pretty and lovely that the fairy queen unconsciously smiled, but it was for a moment only. Aren't you done with your business already? You've been rewarded. You're not asking for more rewards, right? You also have a conscience, right? Cordelia said with a bright smile again at the fairy queen's question. I'm not here for rewards, we have already received enough. Is that so? Yes, I knew right away that you were good children. Having been assured that she didn't come to get rewards, the fairy queen graciously smiled. But it was too early to judge. I don't need rewards, but I need help. Help? Yes, the queen's help. It's very, very important. In a way, it's actually also for the fairies and not us who will be helped. Rather, we'll help the fairies. The fairies would receive help. It was a word choice that made her feel something ominous, but the fairy queen decided to listen to Cordelia's story first. Let's talk. Yes, your majesty. After taking a deep breath, like what she learned from Jude, Cordelia began her she began her story. Episode 85, Returnes 3. While Cordelia met with the wild fairy queen, Jude took off his blindfold and left the bathhouse with Kaplan. Let's go back to the underground and join Cordelia there. Their exact destination was the bridge where Lacto had appeared, the place where the fairy queen had requested the two to get rid of Lacto. There was no bridge now, but the other side was still connected to the outskirts of Endymion. To be able to secretly meet the fairies in this way, it would be a great study. When I get back later, I must try it in a place where there are fairy legends. Oh yes, good luck. It would probably be difficult. A girl who was as beautiful and lovely as Cordelia would not be common even in the vast empire. It's not because of bean pods. TN, this is a comeback of the Korean idiom, one's eyes are covered with bean pods, that was used on episode 76.1. It means to only see the good in someone after falling in love with them. After coming up with such an excuse to himself, Jude opened his mouth again. Moving on, it's still in a relatively safe area, so I'd like to tell you of some information we know. Does that have something to do with the situation right now? Yes, you're right. In fact, we are not just affiliated with the Academy. Kaplan nodded at Jude's words. Because he had seen with his own eyes the powers of Jude and Cordelia, who were too powerful to be just undergraduate students. We actually have a connection with the Guardians of the Holy Cross. Ah, I see. The Guardians of the Holy Cross, who were active throughout the continent, engaged in fierce battles against the demon followers. I understand now. Why the two came to Endymion. Why the hearts of the two were so beautiful. A female saint and a holy man. There seems to be some misunderstanding, but since it doesn't look bad, let's just leave it. When their thoughts were over, the two resumed their conversation. The woman we met earlier was Lena Ainsberg. Have you heard of her? Of course, how could I not know one of the 5 heroes of the Paragon Kingdom, the holy angel Lena? Though there were many stories about the tragedy of the Paragon Kingdom, the incident itself was widely known throughout the continent. It was a great event, since an entire kingdom was destroyed by the demon prince, who was summoned from hell. She's as famous as the Iron Man Landius or the Ghostblade Camel. Holy angel Lena. She was the last angel who was born and raised on Pleiades. Among the 5 heroes of the Paragon Kingdom with all kinds of nicknames, she was the only woman and was symbolized as an angel. That was why she always played the beautiful heroine in the songs of bards, who sang about the tragedy of the Paragon Kingdom. I never planned to meet Lena here. We came here to investigate, but somehow, something bigger than we had expected is happening here in Endymion. With a serious face, Kaplan nodded at Jude's explanation. They had already seen that many monsters from hell. That's all I can explain right now. That's enough, I'll do my best to help you. Kaplan thumped on his chest and stepped forward with enthusiasm, and Jude felt a strange satisfaction at Kaplan's appearance that was quite different from the game. And time passed. After following the map, Jude and Kaplan were finally able to arrive on the opposite side of the bridge. Ah, Jude is here. Cordelia was sitting on the ground and chatting with the fairies before she jumped up from her seat and said. The appearance of her brightly smiling and waving her hand was a heartwarming sight for Jude. Cordelia. Our talks went well, isn't that right, Your Majesty? When Cordelia quickly asked the wild fairy queen sitting on her shoulder, she nodded. I heard everything from Cordelia. You were really working hard for us fairies. As the queen of the wild fairies, I wish to express my gratitude to the both of you. At the words of the wild fairy queen, Kaplan blinked his eyes, wondering what she was talking about, but not for Jude. Because Cordelia smiled and sent a gaze, saying that she worked hard. I did a good job, didn't I? Good job, I'll stamp it for you later. Bullsh asterisk T. TN to those who didn't get it. Some teachers stamp good job to the papers of students who did a good job on something. However, Cordelia's smile grew wider as if she was satisfied. What Cordelia did was actually simple. It's not totally a scam. Something unusual was indeed happening in Endymion's underground. The appearance of Lacto was not a coincidence. Mori demons would appear in the fairies' territory if they had left it unattended. I can't let the fairies be in danger. In order to protect the fairies' territory, Jude and I will investigate it. It would be very dangerous, but we'll still do it, for the safety of the fairies and the queen. There was a slight change in the order of events, and some beautiful words were added, but it wasn't a lie. After all, if they saved Lena and solved Endymion's problem, won't the fairies be safe? It's a win-win situation. Dredge a ditch and catch a crawfish. Sweep the yard and pick up coins. TN, the above 2 lines are Korean Chinese proverbs that pretty much has the same meaning of the English idiom, kill 2 birds with 1 stone. I really don't know what to say. I resented you for a while when you thought of us like that back then. Resented. No, I never resented you, of course not. The graceful fairy queen was flustered when Jude asked her. But Jude was just joking. She was robbed like that in the first place, so it wouldn't make sense if she didn't feel any resentment. Anyway, our plan still went well. The original plan was Jude and Cordelia begging the fairy queen to lend Bellagio, and the fairy queen granting it out of her gratitude for their sacrifice and service. There was a very big difference between the two, particularly if there's a reward or not. Jude's eyes suddenly shone for a moment, but he pushed his self-interest aside and began talking. Fairy Queen, as you've already heard from Cordelia, Lena Ainsberg, one of the 5 heroes of the Paragon Kingdom, seems to be somewhere in Endymion. We need to find her. Yes, I heard about it from Cordelia. You two have worked so hard for us, so it makes sense for us to help you too. My children have already gone to pick up Bellagio, so they'll be here soon. Thank you. Thank you very much. It was shortly after Jude and the Fairy Queen exchanged an amiable conversation. Queen. We brought Bellagio. Good boy. The last one was the words of the fairy on top of Bellagio's head. Ooh, it's a real Bellagio. It looks exactly like the one in the legend. Yeah, though it really looks like a golden retriever. It was a golden retriever that had a white color and had wings. Bellagio flew with the fairies on its head and back, and its personality resembled a golden retriever as it was panting with a gentle face. Say cute, Your Majesty, can I hug it? You may do so. When the Fairy Queen gave her permission, Cordelia widely smiled and hugged Bellagio. Wow, it's soft, Jude, it's cute, right, Kaya Tilda. Her small Kaya at the end was because of Bellagio. Bellagio had licked Cordelia's cheek with its tongue. And so, instead of answering Cordelia's question, Jude counted numbers in his mind. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Done, that was enough. 3 for people and 5 for animals. Jude interrupted the hug by pulling the scruff of Bellagio, who was in Cordelia's arms, and switched the topic right before anyone could say anything. Your Majesty, please forgive for hurrying because we don't have much time. Yes, I know the urgency of the matter. Bellagio needs to remember the traces of mana, so can you give me the feather? Here it is. Jude took out Lena's feather, and the Fairy Queen infused some magic into the feather that was almost the same as her height. Luke, remember this, okay? At the Queen's question, the Bellagio named Luke immediately panted, nodded, and wagged its tail. Yes, good boy. The Queen smiled and said as she looked at Jude again. The Bellagio will lead you. Thank you, and Your Majesty, the introduction was late, but this is Sir Indiana Kaplan. He is a lifelong professor at the Academy in Argon Empire and is a valuable companion of us. The Fairy Queen gracefully smiled at Kaplan when Jude introduced him, and Kaplan blushed and got teary. Because Jude had said that he was a valuable companion. Indiana Kaplan greets the Fairy Queen. When Kaplan courteously greeted her with a quivering voice, the Fairy Queen answered with an elegant voice. Indiana Kaplan, thank you so much for helping us, and since you're a friend of Jude and Cordelia, it would be reasonable to give you a protection too. It was when the Fairy Queen who had said so tried to approach Kaplan. No, he's bald. Potbelly, short-heighted. The fairies who brought Bellagio complained and expressed their opposition. They were indeed fairies who highly valued appearances. But the Fairy Queen was a little different. Unlike the other fairies who acted like kids, she was thoughtful and caring, so she said to the discouraged Kaplan. That's not true, look at him too, these beautiful moist eyes, it's like I'm looking at a jewel. Having said so, the Fairy Queen kissed Kaplan's broad forehead. May the protection of the earth be with you. The Fairy Queen's smile was so benevolent that everyone who saw it would think of her as a saint. Thank you. Kaplan fell into a trance and barely expressed his gratitude, and the Fairy Queen giggled like a fairy, flew back, and then said to Jude and Cordelia, May the protection of the earth be always with you too. Thank you, Fairy Queen. Thank you very much. Jude and Cordelia bowed again, and the Fairy Queen waved her hand at them before taking the fairies back. Just as Jude had said, it was an urgent situation, so they couldn't delay it any longer. Come and see me again when you're done. Yes, Your Majesty. We will. It was questionable if they could receive a reward after returning Bellagio, but getting rewards was also important. Jude waved his hand at the Fairy Queen and began moving again with Bellagio in the light. And quite some time passed. Woof woof, woof woof woof. Bellagio stopped in place and barked. What is it saying? Although Jude was familiar with the various languages in the Legend of Heroes series, he couldn't understand the dog's words. But it was at that moment Cordelia said as her eyes slightly narrowed. UHIT seems like it can feel a lot of mana. Hey. Jude blinked in surprise and asked again, but Cordelia looked at Bellagio instead of answering. Luke, are you saying that there are feathers in many places? Woof 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 woof. I see, there must be feathers everywhere. I think it's asking which one to look for. Bellagio nodded and wagged its tail at Cordelia's interpretation. The two seemed to be exactly the same. As expected of a beast, you can communicate with each other. Do you want to die? Jude nodded at Cordelia's cute threat and said after thinking for a moment. Tell it to follow the one with the greatest trace of mana. Okay, Luke, follow the one with the greatest trace of mana. Wait, you can do it too. No, I thought you'd translate it into beast language. Oh, that hurts, it hurts. Would I hit you if it doesn't hurt? Woof woof, woof woof woof. Cordelia snarled and slapped Jude's back before taking a deep breath and speaking to Luke again. Luke, please. Woof woof. Luke nodded and began to move forward again. And quite some time passed by again. The group approached the center of Endymion slowly but surely. While on the move, they encountered the monsters from hell several times, but fortunately, only a few appeared, so the two were able to defeat them without much difficulty. But when a relaxing time passed like that, Jude strongly felt that something was out of place. It's strange. They encountered several monsters on their way here. There were also 5 different types. However, there were no demonic humans among them. They hadn't encountered a single demon follower. He wondered on what had happened. They were no longer outside, they were on the way to the center. Moreover, the monsters were also strange. They had defeated all the monsters they had encountered so far. However, the alarm had not sounded yet. There seemed to be no monsters who realized that they were moving. How can this be? If someone had summoned the monsters for a purpose, there would be some organizational structure among the monsters. Why is this happening? What is the cause of this strangeness? Woof woof. It was then. Bellagio barked and Cordelia nodded with a tense face. Jude, Lena's mana feels strong here, and from here on this seems to be a different section. At Cordelia's words, Jude quickly opened the map. As she had said, if they left the area they were in right now, they would enter the underground city, the center of the Endymion capital. On the map, it looks like the city was built in a huge cavity. Is it like a city of ancient dwarves? When Kaplan asked in a low voice, Jude nodded. Until now, it had been a common underground facility, but from here on, it was different. It was the beginning of a true underground city, with buildings that were tens of thousands of meters in height, that were built inside the huge cavity. Let's proceed more carefully. Yes. Cordelia replied with a very tense face, spoke quietly as she patted Bellagio's back, and Bellagio began to take the lead again. And a few minutes passed by again. The group arrived in front of an enormous stone gate and unconsciously frowned. Can you feel it? I can feel it. Jude could feel it and Cordelia could also feel the demonic mana because of the witch's power. No, even Kaplan, who was insensitive in that direction, could also feel the immense power that was being transmitted beyond the stone gate. What is it, what's beyond the stone gate, that we could even feel this level of power? It's not right across the door, it's far away. Cordelia said after she had closed her eyes and maximized her senses. Jude couldn't also feel such a power right behind the stone gate. Lena's mana is in between that power. It was the link between Lena's death and some sort of incident in Endymion. Jude composed himself as he took a deep breath before looking back at everyone. Let's go. We're ready. Woof woof. After hearing everyone's answers, Jude opened the stone door. And immediately afterwards, the moment they saw the sight before their eyes, Jude understood it. He figured out the only answer that could explain all the incongruities up to now. Hell Gate. It wasn't something like a summoning. It wasn't an incident involving the devil's eyes either. The monsters from hell suddenly appeared. They had been wandering around without any chain of command. It was natural. They weren't summoned with a special purpose in the first place. They just stepped into Endymion through the Hell Gate. In the center of Endymion was a giant magic sphere like the sun. It was something that could be seen at a far distance. The purple aura of hell overflowed between the cracks of that huge space. Episode 86, ITURNES 4. Hell Gate. Something that directly connected hell and this world. That was why there was no need for a separate summoning ceremony. Sacrifices were not necessary, as the demons were able to descend on this world through their own power. "There's no way," Cordelia unconsciously said. Jude agreed. It was too early. The Hell Gate had only appeared in the latter half of Legend of Heroes 2. Fortunately, the Hell Gate was still not in its complete form. It was currently just a crack, so there was a limit to both the quality and quantity of demons that could cross over. However, it would be catastrophic if left unattended. The moment the Hell Gate reached its complete form, it would become possible for even the overlords of hell to descend to this world. So that was why. He fully understood it now. The reason why Lena died in Raptor Canyon. It was because of the Hell Gate. Lena must have sacrificed her life to close the Hell Gate. It was a dilemma. If they neglected the Hell Gate, a catastrophe would be unavoidable. But to close the Hell Gate, it required the sacrifice of someone like Lena. No, let's not jump into conclusions. That isn't the only conclusion. He had not yet fully grasped the situation. He only knew that Lena had sacrificed herself to close the Hell Gate, but he didn't know how she closed it or how she used up her power at that time. So it was still too early to give up. Perhaps there was something else. Woof woof. It was then. Bellagio suddenly began to bark, and Jude and Cordelia, who were distracted by the Hell Gate, came to their senses. Woof woof woof. Lena, it knows where Lena is, let's go after her. They should meet Lena first. They should meet, get some information, and find a way to solve this situation. Cordelia's words were right. Jude lifted up Kaplan, who was suffering from the energy of hell, and then glanced at Cordelia. Luke, guide us. Woof woof. At Cordelia's command, Bellagio began running fast. They all ran forward. It was like they were racing towards the Hell Gate. And Jude saw. The closer they got to the Hell Gate, the more that they could clearly see. There were demons from hell. Between the purple aura of hell and the green aura that resembled poison, they could see the silhouettes of countless monsters. Some of the demons seemed quite powerful. Less than 100. It was the number of demons that had already passed through the gate. He wondered if they could fight against that number of monsters, even if they had closed the gate. Woof woof. Jude. Bellagio called their attention again. Cordelia's call brought Jude to his senses and into the reality in front of them. It's Lena. Jude could feel her now. At a place just 200 meters away from the Hell Gate, located in the middle of the city. Lena was in a 5-story building that looked like a tower. He could feel her power. And the other side too. Kaya. At the time of Cordelia's small scream, Jude felt his vision darken. It was just a short moment, but he lost his body's freedom and struggled in the air before he saw the light again. Oh, that was Cordelia. She had fallen from the air and landed on her butt, while Jude safely landed thanks to his special body constitution, Chinmujic, and put Kaplan down before he looked at his front. A person stood there as he had expected. Haven't I told you to run away? It was a blonde woman with a grey hood covering the top of her head. She had used polite language, but her words had a mixture of anger and a little irritation. No, it was more of nervousness. Now you know, this place is dangerous. Run away and avoid the monsters. I can't afford to take care of you. It was a firm tone, as if she would not allow any objections. But Jude didn't heed her words. Rather, he had to change her mind. And Jude knew what to say. Landius disciple Jude Baer greets you. It was a short statement, but it was enough to shake Lena's mind. She quickly spoke at the words of Jude. Can you prove it? No, even if you're Landius' real disciple. May the muscles always be with you. It was Cordelia. As she jumped up from her spot and shouted, Bellagio and Kaplan suddenly blinked their eyes at the words that seemed like nonsense, and even Jude was embarrassed. But not for Lena. Although it was hard to see her face because of her hood, she evidently became dazed, but soon nodded her head. Landius acquaintance, moreover, a close acquaintance. Because Landius was the only one who made such an odd greeting. In addition, Landius wished for the protection of muscles only to his really close acquaintances, which was something Jude and Cordelia didn't know. Yes, Jude is Landius' disciple. When Cordelia spoke again, Jude came to his senses and followed up to her words. Master taught me the ninth heaven's 9 doors. As I said before, I am Jude Bayer. This is my fiancée, Cordelia Chase. Lena reacted once again to Jude's words. Ninth heaven's 9 doors. After the tragedy of the Paragon Kingdom, Landius declared that he would devote his life in mastering the transcendental being's martial art. It wasn't just Lena who was surprised. Kaplan managed to keep with the current conversation and expressed his shock at something completely different from Lena. Bayer and Chase, you two were children from the 12 northern families. Among the 12 families in the northern part of the Len Kingdom, it wasn't an exaggeration to say that the Bayer and Chase families were particularly well known. No, wait, so you're saying that you are children from the 12 northern families, and at the same time, you are researchers at the capital's academy and also members of the Guardians of the Holy Cross, and that you're the current disciple of Iron Man Landius? Yes, roughly. They weren't researchers at the capital's academy. But Cordelia had become accustomed to, I didn't lie, kind of words that she had learned from Jude. In any case, what Kaplan said didn't matter right now. Jude stepped closer to Lena and said, We must close the Hell Gate. It's still in the early stages, or to be exact, it is close to the end of the first stage and the start of the second stage, so if it continues to grow, it would be a catastrophe. When it reaches the 4th stage and a demon prince descends, the tragedy of Paragon will be repeated in the wild lands. Lena already knew about that fact, but Jude had to mention it. It was to convey to Lena that their group was not ignorant about the Hell Gate too. I'm Landius' disciple. I've inherited the 9th heaven's 9 doors, though I've only been able to open up to the 3rd door. As for Cordelia, she inherited the power of the witch, or more known as the Witch of the West Forest. Whether it's something small or big, we will help. Lena reacted again to his barrage of words. 9th heaven's 9 doors and the Witch of the West Forest, which was the nickname of the witch who confronted the Overlord of Hell in the past, was enough to stir her heart. But it's really dangerous. Of course, it is dangerous. But Master Lena closing the Hell Gate would also be in danger, so please allow us to help. Isn't there a saying that 2 heads are better than 1? At his sincere words, Lena covered her face with both hands and soon nodded. Okay, let's do it together. I think you already know, I am Lena Ainsberg. I'm Jude. I'm Cordelia. Cordelia quickly followed up after watching Jude convince the anxious Lena. Jude and Cordelia, the one over there. I'm Indiana Kaplan. I'm a professor at the Institutional Academy of Argon Empire. Kaplan stammered a little, but after he introduced himself, Lena nodded and then told Jude and Cordelia again. I think you've already figured out the situation to some extent, so I'll tell you quickly. As Jude said, the Hell Gate is at the second half of the first stage. If we leave it like this, it will enter into the second stage, and then higher class monsters will appear. Named demons will also be able to descend. So we have to close the Hell Gate before that happens. There were 2 ways to close the Hell Gate, and one of them was the Heavenly Seal, a heavenly spell that the Sun God taught when it descended in this world. Are you going to use the Heavenly Seal? Lena was surprised at Jude's question, but immediately nodded. Yes, that's right, but I wasn't strong enough to use the Heavenly Seal, so I was working on a plan. You're not strong enough? Cordelia asked as her eyes blinked. She would react like that because it was the holy angel Lena, and not anyone else, who was standing before her. Having acquired the power of an angel through ancestral regression, she was no longer human. She was the strongest of the 5 heroes, if one was to only talk about the amount of mana. So it didn't make sense for Lena to not have enough power to properly use the Heavenly Seal. There's something. Although the Heavenly Seal was a spell that required an enormous amount of mana, it did not require enough power to the point that it would take Lena's life. But Lena sealed the Hell Gate and died from exhausting her power. Why? What is the missing link between the two? And one more. How did Lena know about it and came here? As Jude himself and Lena had said several times now, the Hell Gate was around the second half of the first stage. At this stage, the power of Hell did not leak out of Endymion. Even the Fairy Queen, whose territory was currently at the outskirts of Endymion, did not know about the existence of the Hell Gate. But how did Lena know about it? By chance. When Lena came to Endymion, the Hell Gate was already opened. It wasn't an impossible situation. But other questions arose here. Who opened the Hell Gate? Why was the Hell Gate opened? These questions were listed in Jude's mind. Lena's death. Lena's condition of being unable to properly use the Heavenly Seal. Lena finding out that the Hell Gate was opened in Endymion faster than anyone else. Instead of asking someone for help, she handled the situation alone. The Hell Gate's the reason why the Hell Gate opened. During the time when Lena hesitated to immediately answer Cordelia's question, Jude made a deduction. One answer came out. Lena, it was you. It was consistent and reasonable with his earlier and later words. Cordelia and Kaplan couldn't understand what he meant. But not for Lena. She hunched her shoulders and clenched her teeth. Her face was not visible because it was covered by her hood, but he could imagine her distressed face. Jude. When Cordelia called him, Jude closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He came to an answer that could explain the entire current situation. He said as he looked at Lena and not Cordelia. Lena, you opened the Hell Gate. It was not the Devil's Eye. They were not involved in this situation at all. It was the holy angel Lena who opened the Hell Gate. Cordelia was stunned at Jude's words, and Lena nodded her head. She said as she took off the hood she was wearing on her head. You are right, Jude, I opened the Hell Gate.